The Odyssey groaned, its metal frame protesting under the stress of deep space travel. Thomas gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white as he fought to keep the ship steady. Warning lights blinked across the console, casting an eerie red glow over the cockpit. "Come on, girl," he muttered, patting the dashboard. "Hold it together." Suddenly, the ship jolted, throwing Thomas forward. His head slammed into the control panel, and he tasted blood. Cursing under his breath, he squinted at the readouts. The warp drive was failing, and life support systems were rapidly depleting. Desperate, he scanned for any habitable planets nearby. His heart leapt when a small, greenish planet appeared on the edge of his radar. It wasn't ideal, but it was his only hope. Emergency landing protocol initiated. The ship's AI droned in its usual monotone. Gritting his teeth, Thomas braced as the Odyssey hurtled toward the planet. Flames licked at the viewports as the heat shields kicked in, the ship descending rapidly through the atmosphere. He wrestled with the controls, aiming for a clearing in the dense, alien forest below. The impact rattled every bone in his body, metal screeching against rock as the ship skidded to a stop, leaving a deep trench in its wake. When the dust finally settled, Thomas took a deep breath and ran a systems check. "Status report," he commanded. The AI's voice crackled through the speakers. "Hull integrity at 62%. Warp drive offline. Life support at 40%. Estimated repair time, 72 hours. Thomas groaned, rubbing his temples. He'd need to scavenge for materials to get the ship up and running again. At least the atmosphere was breathable, though a bit thin. Grabbing his emergency pack and pressurizing his suit, he stepped out onto alien soil. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of unfamiliar vegetation. Two suns hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the clearing. Activating his wrist scanner, he searched for useful materials. A faint energy signature appeared about a kilometer to the east. Machete in hand, Thomas began cutting his way through the dense underbrush. As he hiked, an unsettling feeling washed over him, like something or someone was watching. His eyes darted around, but the forest remained still. The energy signature led him to a small clearing, where he froze, his breath catching in his throat. In the center lay the broken form of a humanoid being. Her skin was a glowing, almost iridescent green, and though alien, she was stunningly beautiful. Barely alive, her chest rose and fell in shallow, strained breaths, and her limbs were twisted at awkward angles. Cautiously, Thomas approached, his medical training taking over. "Hey," he called softly. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, revealing deep purple irises. She flinched, fear etched across her delicate face. Thomas raised his hands, trying to appear non-threatening. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. I want to help." She murmured something in a language he couldn't understand. His wrist computer beeped, attempting a translation. "Rest, leave me die alone," it supplied haltingly. Frowning, Thomas shook his head. "I'm not leaving you here to die. Can you move?" The alien woman weakly shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. Thomas made a decision. He couldn't just abandon her. "I'm going to carry you back to my ship," he explained, gesturing to make his intentions clear. She didn't resist as he lifted her into his arms. Her body was light, her skin cool and smooth against his. The journey back was exhausting, and by the time Thomas reached the Odyssey, his muscles burned with effort. He laid her gently on a makeshift bed in the cargo bay and quickly gathered medical supplies. As he cleaned and dressed her wounds, he couldn't help but marvel at her physiology. Despite her otherworldly appearance, her anatomy was surprisingly human-like. Over the next few days, Thomas divided his time between repairing the ship and tending to the alien woman, whom he learned was named Kate. As her strength returned, so did her curiosity about him and his ship. She watched him work, and he taught her the names of the tools and components, helping her build a basic understanding of his language. Their connection deepened as they communicated more, with Kate learning quickly. One evening, as they sat together in the cockpit, sharing a meal, Kate asked, "Why help me? I am not like you." Thomas shrugged, feeling self-conscious under her intense gaze. "It was the right thing to do. I couldn't just leave you there. Kate frowned, tilting her head. Right thing? What does it mean? He paused, searching for the right words. It means doing what's good, and just, even when it's difficult. Helping others, not because you have to, but because it's the right thing for everyone. She considered this, her expression thoughtful. Your people all do the right thing? Thomas laughed, though there was a bitter edge to it. No, not all of them, but I try. As the days passed, their bond grew. Kate's wounds healed quickly, faster than Thomas would have imagined. She grew more comfortable around him, and soon the distance between them closed. One evening, after a long day of repairs, Kate asked him, "How do humans show affection?" Caught off guard, Thomas hesitated. There are different ways: hugs, kind words, gifts. Some people kiss. Kate tilted her head. What is kiss? Thomas felt his face flush. It's when two people press their lips together. It's a sign of affection, usually romantic. Her eyes brightened with curiosity. Show me. Thomas nearly choked on his response. No, that's not. He stopped, seeing the disappointment in her eyes. It's not that you did anything wrong, he added quickly. It's just kissing is usually something people do when they have deep feelings for each other. When they're in a relationship. Kate looked at him, confused. We are not in a relationship. Thomas sighed, running a hand through his hair. We're friends, Kate. But romantic relationships, they're complicated, especially between two different species. She nodded, though she still seemed puzzled. Humans make simple things hard. He chuckled at that. Yeah, we do. But as the days wore on, the tension between them grew. Every casual touch seemed charged. Every glance held deeper meaning. One night, as they prepared to rest, Kate approached him with determination. Thomas, she whispered, I want to learn more about human affection. Before he could reply, she gently cupped his face, her lips brushing his in a soft, tentative kiss. Thomas knew he should pull away, should stop what was happening. But instead, he found himself deepening the kiss, pulled into the warmth and the connection they shared. As they broke apart, both breathing heavily, Kate's eyes glistened with wonder. That was kiss, she asked softly. Thomas nodded, his mind racing with the implications of what they had just started. But in that moment, as Kate gently stroked his cheek, he realized that no matter how complicated things might get, they would figure it out together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. Thomas awoke to the gentle hum of the Odyssey's systems and the soft warmth of Kate curled against him. Her breathing was steady, and her green skin seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light of the ship's morning cycle. For a moment, he lay still, his mind swirling with conflicting emotions. The events of the previous night played over in his head, the kiss, the closeness, the feelings he had been so determined to ignore. He shifted slightly, trying not to disturb her. What am I doing? The thought gnawed at him. There was so much he didn't understand about Kate, about her people, about what any of this meant. Yet there was a quiet peace in this moment, something deeper than just physical attraction. It was more than that, a connection he couldn't explain. Kate stirred beside him, her eyes slowly fluttering open. A soft smile touched her lips as she met his gaze. Good morning, Thomas, she murmured, her voice a low, melodic hum. Morning, Thomas replied, his voice husky from sleep. For a second, he wasn't sure what to say. The weight of the previous night still hung between them, unspoken. How are you feeling? Better, she said, sitting up slowly, her movements graceful despite the lingering stiffness in her limbs. Stronger. You helped. Thomas nodded, sitting up as well. I'm glad. He hesitated, glancing at her. About last night, Kate tilted her head, her purple eyes studying him intently. Did I do wrong? She asked, her voice soft, but there was a vulnerability there Thomas hadn't seen before. No, he said quickly, shaking his head. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just complicated. I don't know if we should. Kate reached out, placing a hand on his arm. Humans always say complicated. She gave a small, amused smile. But I think it is not so complicated. We feel something. We care for each other. Yes. Thomas looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of her words settle on him. She was right. It wasn't really that complicated, at least not in this moment. They did care for each other, and maybe that was enough. Maybe it didn't need to make sense right now. Yeah, he said softly. We do. Kate's smile widened slightly, and she leaned closer, resting her forehead against his. For a moment, they just sat there, breathing in sync, the quiet hum of the ship the only sound around them. After a long pause, Thomas sighed, reluctantly pulling away. We should get to work, he said, the practical part of his mind kicking back in. The ship's repairs aren't going to finish themselves. Kate nodded, though there was a trace of disappointment in her eyes. Yes, work. I will help. They spent the morning working side by side, their conversations less strained, though the air between them still held an unspoken tension. Kate was focused, learning quickly as Thomas guided her through the remaining tasks. They replaced damaged wiring, recalibrated the ship's systems, and rerouted power to the engines. The work was tedious, but with Kate's help, they made significant progress. As they worked, Thomas couldn't help but notice how comfortable it had become, having Kate there. Her presence was calming, and even though their bond was new and uncertain, there was a natural rhythm to their teamwork. Every now and then, he'd catch her watching him, her eyes filled with curiosity, and something else, something deeper. By mid-afternoon, the ship systems were nearly fully restored, though the warp drive still remained offline. Thomas stood back, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Looks like we're almost done. We just need to fix the warp drive, and we'll be space-worthy again. Kate nodded, though she seemed distracted, her gaze distant. What happens when ship is fixed? She asked suddenly, her voice quieter than usual. Thomas turned to her, unsure how to answer. He'd been so focused on the repairs that he hadn't really thought about what came next. We leave, he said, the words sounding hollow even to him. I need to get back to my people. And you, he stopped, realizing he didn't even know where Kate came from or if she had a home to return to. I have nowhere, Kate said softly, as if reading his thoughts. My world is gone. I am the last. Thomas felt a pang in his chest. He had suspected she was alone, but hearing her say it so plainly hit him harder than he expected. I'm sorry, he whispered, not knowing what else to say. Kate looked at him, her expression unreadable. If you leave, I will be alone again, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I do not want to be alone. Thomas's heart ached at her words. He hadn't considered what it would mean for Kate once the Odyssey was repaired. She had no one else, no place to go, and the thought of leaving her behind, of abandoning her, felt wrong in every possible way. You don't have to be alone, he said quietly, his voice firm with resolve. Come with me. Kate's eyes widened in surprise. You mean stay with you? In your world? Thomas nodded. Yes, we'll figure it out. It won't be easy, but I don't want to leave you behind, Kate. For a moment, Kate was silent, her gaze searching his face as if trying to understand the depth of his offer. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her lips. I would like that, she said softly, stepping closer. To not be alone. Thomas reached out, gently taking her hand in his. You won't be, he promised. Not anymore. As they stood together, hand in hand, the weight of their future pressed down on them. There would be challenges, dangers, and uncertainties ahead, both from the universe and from within themselves. But in that moment, with the ship almost ready for takeoff and the path ahead uncertain, one thing was clear to both of them. They would face whatever came next together. With the promise of a shared future hanging in the air, Thomas and Kate dove back into the repairs, both energized by the bond they were forming. The ship's interior buzzed with renewed purpose as they worked side by side, laughter punctuating their focused efforts. By the time evening rolled around, they had successfully repaired the ship's life support systems and restored power to the main engines. The warp drive, however, remained a puzzle. As they sat together in the cockpit, Thomas furrowed his brow at the schematics spread before them. Okay, let's see, he said, tracing a line on the display. The warp drive needs a new power coupling, but I'm not sure if we have the right materials on board. Kate leaned closer, her vibrant green skin glowing softly in the low light. Can we find what we need on the planet's surface? She suggested. You said the atmosphere is breathable. Thomas considered it, his mind racing. It's a possibility. If we can locate the right resources, it might save us some time. He glanced at her, feeling the excitement in her eyes. But it won't be easy. We'll need to be careful. Kate nodded eagerly. I'm not afraid. We will find what we need together. After gathering their gear, they stepped outside into the alien world. The landscape was stunning, with towering trees and vibrant flora, the two suns casting a golden hue across the clearing. The air was thick with moisture, carrying the scent of exotic blooms and rich earth. Thomas activated his wrist scanner, scanning for materials. Let's head east toward that mountain range, he suggested, pointing to a distant line of peaks. We might find some deposits there. They trekked through the dense forest, the underbrush thick and unfamiliar. As they walked, Kate's presence beside him felt both comforting and exhilarating. He couldn't help but steal glances at her. How she moved with an ethereal grace, the way her hair caught the light. He pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on their mission. As they approached the mountains, Thomas's scanner pinged. I'm picking up some energy readings nearby, he said, excitement bubbling in his chest. It could be a source for the coupling we need. Kate's eyes sparkled with anticipation. Lead the way. They navigated through the rocky terrain, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the stone. Soon, they stumbled upon a cave entrance, partially obscured by vines and ferns. The air was cooler here, and an otherworldly glow emanated from within. This is it, Thomas said, glancing at Kate. Are you ready? She nodded, her expression determined. Always. As they stepped into the cave, the glow intensified, revealing shimmering crystals embedded in the walls. Thomas marveled at the sight. These could be perfect for the warp drive, he whispered, reaching out to touch one. The surface felt warm beneath his fingertips, pulsing with energy. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the cave, and the ground shook beneath their feet. Thomas's heart raced as he turned to Kate. We should hurry. They began to collect the crystals, carefully prying them from the walls. Just as they filled their pack, another tremor shook the cave, sending small rocks tumbling from above. Let's get out, Thomas shouted, leading the way back toward the entrance. As they raced through the cave, Thomas glanced back, his heart pounding. Just then, a large rock fell from the ceiling, blocking their exit. Panic surged through him. Kate, we have to find another way. Kate's eyes widened as she surveyed their surroundings. There's a passage over there. She pointed to a narrow opening to the side, partially hidden by shadows. Without hesitation, they dashed toward it, squeezing through just as another tremor rocked the cave. Inside, the passage narrowed, forcing them to move carefully. Thomas's heart raced, not just from fear, but from the adrenaline of being so close to danger. He could feel Kate beside him, her presence grounding him amidst the chaos. Finally, they burst into a larger chamber, breathless and panting. The air here was still, the glow from the crystals illuminating the space in an otherworldly light. Thomas turned to Kate, relief flooding through him. Are you okay? I am, she replied, her voice steady. But we should not linger. They hurried to the other side of the chamber, where another exit loomed. Just as they reached it, the ground shook again, and Thomas braced himself against the wall. We need to move faster. They pushed through the opening, emerging into daylight just as a loud crash echoed behind them. A plume of dust erupted from the cave entrance, debris falling and sealing off their previous route. Thomas and Kate stumbled into the sunlight, hearts racing. I think we made it, Thomas said, breathing heavily. He looked at Kate, who was staring at him with wide eyes, a mixture of awe and excitement. We did, she exclaimed, a radiant smile lighting up her face. We are alive. Thomas laughed, the thrill of survival washing over him. And we got what we needed. He opened the pack to reveal the glowing crystals. These should work for the warp drive. Kate took one of the crystals, holding it up to the light. They are beautiful, she said, her eyes shimmering with admiration. They are, Thomas agreed, feeling a rush of gratitude for the adventure they had just shared. In that moment, he realized how much he had come to rely on her, not just for survival, but for the joy she brought into his life. As they made their way back to the Odyssey, a sense of camaraderie settled between them. The fear they had faced together had only deepened their connection, solidifying the bond that had formed in such a short time. Once inside the ship, they immediately set to work, using the crystals to repair the warp drive. Kate watched intently as Thomas guided her through the process, their movements synchronized like they had been doing this for years. When they finally powered up the warp drive, a triumphant hum resonated through the cockpit. Thomas felt a rush of exhilaration. "We did it!" Kate clapped her hands, her laughter ringing like music. Together, as they celebrated their success, Thomas realized that they had not just salvaged a ship, they had forged a partnership. A partnership that would face whatever lay ahead, whether it be challenges, discoveries, or the vast unknown of the universe. And as they prepared for their next journey, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. Whatever awaited them in the stars, they would face it together, united by adventure, hope, and a connection that transcended worlds. With the warp drive operational, Thomas and Kate worked tirelessly to finalize the repairs on the Odyssey. The ship hummed with energy, its systems coming alive as they calibrated each component. Thomas felt a mix of exhilaration and anticipation. This was more than just fixing a ship. It was about embarking on a new journey together. As they finished up, Thomas wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned back in his chair, looking at Kate. "It's done. We're ready to leave this planet." Kate's face lit up with a smile, her eyes sparkling. "We can explore the stars together." "Exactly," Thomas replied, his heart swelling at the thought. He felt a warmth in his chest, knowing they were embarking on an adventure that was uniquely theirs. "But first, we should run a final systems check before we take off." They moved around the cockpit, ensuring everything was in order. As they worked, the atmosphere between them felt charged with unspoken excitement. Each accidental brush of their hands sent a jolt through Thomas, reminding him of the bond they were forging. "Okay, all systems green," Thomas announced, feeling a rush of satisfaction. "Ready for launch?" Kate nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, let us go." Thomas took a deep breath, fingers hovering over the controls. "Here we go." He initiated the launch sequence, and the ship vibrated gently as the engines roared to life. "Engaging warp drive," he said, glancing at Kate. Her eyes were wide, filled with wonder as the stars outside began to stretch and warp into brilliant lines of light. With a burst of speed, the Odyssey shot into the cosmos, leaving the alien world behind. Thomas felt a surge of exhilaration, the thrill of the unknown beckoning them forward. "Where to now?" Kate asked, her voice filled with excitement. "Let's check the nearby star systems," Thomas suggested, pulling up a holographic star map. "There's a lot we can explore, and we might find some habitable planets." Kate leaned closer, her fascination evident as she studied the map. "So many places," she whispered. "What do you want to see first?" Thomas thought for a moment. "I've always wanted to visit a planet with a lush landscape, maybe one with waterfalls and forests. It would be nice to experience a world that feels alive." Kate's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "Then let's find that place." They set their course and traveled through the stars, the ship gliding smoothly. As they ventured deeper into space, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was a new beginning, not just for them as explorers, but as partners in every sense of the word. After a few hours of travel, a planet came into view on the scanner. It was a vibrant green orb, swirling with clouds and patches of blue water. Thomas's heart raced. "That looks promising. Prepare to scan for life signs." Kate chimed, her excitement infectious. Thomas activated the ship's scanners, watching as data flooded in. "It appears to have a breathable atmosphere and signs of complex life. We should check it out." "Let's land," Kate urged, her enthusiasm palpable. Thomas nodded, piloting the ship toward the surface. As they descended, the vibrant landscape unfolded beneath them. Lush forests, cascading waterfalls, and vast meadows dotted with colorful flora. It was everything he had imagined and more. They touched down in a clearing near a large waterfall, the sound of rushing water filling the air. Thomas and Kate quickly gathered their gear, excitement bubbling between them. "This is amazing," Kate exclaimed as they stepped outside, taking in the scenery. The air was fresh and invigorating, filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Thomas grinned, his heart soaring at the sight. "It really is. Let's explore." They wandered through the forest, Kate leading the way with a natural grace. The vibrant colors and exotic plants surrounded them, each step revealing more beauty. Kate's laughter rang out as she spotted strange creatures flitting between the trees, their colors matching the flowers that blossomed around them. "Look at that!" She pointed to a small, iridescent bird hovering nearby. It chirped melodically, and Kate smiled, captivated. "It's so beautiful." Thomas watched her, feeling a warmth spread through him. He loved seeing her this way, filled with wonder and joy. "It is," he agreed, stepping closer to her side. They continued their exploration, discovering meandering streams and colorful flora. Kate knelt to examine a peculiar plant, its petals shimmering like jewels in the sunlight. "This could be useful for our supplies," she noted, carefully taking a sample. As they ventured further, they found a large, open meadow. The sun bathed the area in golden light, and in the center stood a magnificent waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool. The sight took Thomas's breath away. "Wow," he said, stepping closer to the edge of the pool. "This is incredible." Kate joined him, her eyes wide with awe. "We should swim," she suggested, glancing at the shimmering water. Thomas hesitated, but the joy in her voice was contagious. "You're right. Let's do it." They quickly shed their gear, laughter bubbling between them as they jumped into the cool water. It was refreshing, and Thomas felt a sense of freedom wash over him. Kate splashed playfully, her laughter echoing around them as she swam with grace. After a while, they floated on their backs, gazing up at the sky. The twin suns hung high, casting a warm glow over everything. Thomas stole a glance at Kate, her expression serene, and felt a sense of peace settle within him. "This feels perfect," he said, breaking the silence. "It does," Kate replied softly, turning her head to meet his gaze. "I am grateful for this moment." Thomas smiled, feeling a rush of connection. "Me too. I'm glad we're together." Kate's expression softened, and for a moment, the world around them faded. There was a deep understanding in her gaze, a recognition of the bond they were forming. But then, a distant rumble echoed through the air, breaking the tranquility. They both turned, looking toward the horizon where dark clouds were gathering. "What's that?" Thomas asked, concern creeping into his voice. Kate's brow furrowed. "I do not know. It does not look good." They swam back to the shore, quickly retrieving their gear. Thomas activated his wrist scanner, trying to gather information. "I'm detecting unusual energy readings. We should head back to the ship." Kate nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, we must be careful." As they made their way through the forest, the air became charged with tension, the rumble growing louder. Thomas glanced at Kate, sensing her unease. "Stay close to me." They reached the ship just as the storm began to unleash its fury. Wind howled around them, and the first drops of rain fell, quickly turning into a torrential downpour. "Get inside," Thomas shouted, ushering Kate into the cockpit. He secured the hatch just as the storm hit, the sound of the rain pounding against the metal hull echoing ominously. Once inside, they both took a moment to catch their breath. Thomas activated the ship's external sensors, watching as the storm rolled over the landscape. "What do you see?" Kate asked, her eyes wide. "Powerful winds and electrical activity." "I've never seen a storm like this," he said, frowning at the readings. "It's not just rain. It looks like there's some kind of energy surge coming from the mountain range." Kate's expression grew serious. "We should investigate. It could be a danger to the planet, or it might affect the ship." Thomas hesitated, torn between the urgency of the situation and the safety of staying inside. "It could be dangerous out there." "Thomas," Kate said firmly, "if we don't investigate, we might miss something important. We need to understand what is happening." He met her gaze, seeing the determination in her eyes. She was right. They couldn't ignore the situation. Okay, but we'll be cautious. Together, they suited up and prepared to step outside again. As Thomas opened the hatch, the wind whipped around them, and rain lashed at their faces. They made their way back toward the mountain range, the storm intensifying with every step. The air crackled with energy, and Thomas could feel the tension building around them. Kate stayed close, her presence reassuring amidst the chaos. As they neared the mountains, a brilliant flash of light erupted from above, illuminating the sky. Thomas shielded his eyes, heart racing. "What was that?" "I do not know," Kate said, her voice barely audible over the storm. "We must find shelter and get a better view." They hurried to a nearby rock formation, seeking refuge from the rain. As they crouched beneath the overhang, Thomas pulled up the scanner again, hoping for more information. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and the air shimmered with a strange energy. Kate grasped his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Thomas!" Before they could react, a blinding light enveloped them, and the world around them seemed to warp and distort. Thomas felt a sensation of weightlessness, as if they were being pulled through space itself. "Hold on!" he shouted, instinctively wrapping his arms around Kate as the light consumed them. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything went dark.